It's been a real struggle for me to write characters. That's one area that I was really, really poor at. That's how Gus came to be, is somebody that's different. That was written as a standalone thriller. Never, ever envisioned Gus or Vanessa or any of the characters to move on.
How much research actually for you goes into kind of creating these cases, and where do you usually begin? Because it's so believable, at least in my mind, when I've been reading these books.
I never knew what other authors did. I mean, I've heard a quote somewhere, I forget who said it, it is fiction, right? You can make up anything you want to make up.
Right. I loved it. So sorry you had to get through all that, but the product was phenomenal, so I enjoyed it.
Oh, that just happens,
Yeah.
It really happens where the story just kind of shows itself. And I'm a planner. I outline the stuff out. I outline a frack out of this. And right now, it's just kind of that's where it's going.
If Gus Wheeler could solve one famous, real life mystery, what would you want him to solve?
Whoa, that's a good one. I love weird things, for lack of better, the occult thing. So I would go to...
Hey everyone, welcome back to Judging by the Cover. I'm Brittany, and today I'm excited because we're chatting with thriller author R. John Dingle, whose newest Gus Wheeler thriller, Before the Devil Knows, comes out July 29th. If you've been around me for a while, you know that I absolutely love this series. I've read every single Gus Wheeler novel, and somehow each installment just raises the stakes even higher. They're exactly the kind of books that you're saying, just one more chapter until it's 2 a.m. So let me get John to join with us. Hi, John.
Here we go.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we dive into Before the Devil Knows, I'd love for everyone who's meeting you for the first time today, just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So for anyone who's discovering you for the first time, how would you elevator pitch the Gus Wheeler series?
Ooh, haven't had to do that in a while, I will say. Let's see. Elevator pitch for the Gus Wheeler series. So FBI agents, unconventional. The stories are very much thriller, not just mystery. So I try to write them so that you're sort of watching a movie or a thriller show where the points of view move from one scene can be seen by 2 or 3 different points of view through the chapters. So very much a thriller and hopefully twisty with great endings.
Yes, I can totally verify that both of those things for the entire series. It does happen to anyone who has not read them. But I know, what makes Gus kind of stand out from other FBI investigators who readers might already know? And you say he's kind of unconventional. I'd love for you to kind of talk more about that.
Well, that was the challenge early on, actually. So I tried to write, I'll try to keep it short. I tried to write a thriller where a non-law enforcement person solved the crime. This is years ago now. Well, by the time the first book, Karma, came out, I'd been writing for 10 years with nothing published. And I just couldn't figure it out. So then I thought law enforcement. And then I wanted something more than just a town. So I went FBI. And then to your question, I asked the same thing. There's so many stories out there written about FBI agents, right?
Yes.
And my wife came up with a great idea. She said, why isn't Gus an aspiring musician? Right? We have 3 children. Our middle child, Sam, is a professional jazz player, musician.
Oh.
And she said, look at Sam. He's going gig to gig. He's scrounging. He's hunting for, he doesn't have life insurance. He doesn't have health insurance, all those things. Why can't Gus be that? And he has a friend in the FBI that says, come on, dude, I'll at least give you a constant paycheck. Right? So that coupled with Gus is very much like my son, severely dyslexic and just able to pick up on patterns. And this is real world stuff. My wife is like that. My son's like that, where they'll see information that's all over and they'll be like, doot, 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 and they'll pick out the trend or the pattern there. And Gus is the same way. So he's that way. And then I needed to match him with a partner. And so I'll lay that softball out there for Vanessa. But that's how Gus came to be, is somebody that's different.
That is so interesting. And that was actually one of the questions from one of my followers is did you base Gus off of anyone? And that you just answered that. So that's amazing to kind of know right off the bat. I think he's just so believable as a character, which is why I've kind of latched onto this series. Has writing him changed the way you think about him at all? Or were there parts of his personality that kind of came out that surprised you, or how has he kind of evolved through the series?
So hard yes. So the first book, Karma Never Sleeps, I'll come back. That wasn't the original title, so we'll hit that later.
Gotcha.
That was written as a standalone thriller. Never, ever envisioned Gus or Vanessa or any of the characters to move on. And so I had the dream scenario that every writer like lies in bed and waits for, right? Got an agent. She was pushing it out. Took us about a year and a half to get some bites. We get a bite. Thule came in and said, no, we want it too. And then Thule said, our only consideration, our only constraint really is, would he consider making it a series? I had thought about it, but both my agent and I were like, could Gus carry a series? Don't know, right? And so, out of nowhere, within a 2 or 3 week span, had a 3-book offer from a publisher, which was just mind blowing. I can remember telling my daughter, who you've seen in some of the videos.
Yes.
I can remember telling her that, and she was like just gobsmacked, right? So with all that as a background, Gus was written as not a throwaway character, but a one-hit wonder, right?
Oh,
and so
that is so interesting.
And I had written a completely different book that's in the drawer now of a different, whole different story, standalone thriller. So after about a year and a half, 2 years coming back and like, all right, I need to make Gus a recurring character. Like, how do you do that, right? It's not easy. I will say I underappreciated how difficult it is reading a series and keeping the characters fresh and writing a book that you, Britt, have read the others and you're like, oh, I love this evolution of Gus and V. But somebody that just picks up Devil's like, a good book, good characters, but not being redundant, right?
Right, exactly. And I think I've explained that in my reviews. It's like you could totally read these books as like standalones, right? But you're not going to get that amazing character development because the Gus from the first book is not the Gus we see in the third book, which is it was just interesting to me because normally you're right, like thrillers are standalones. Normally there's not a lot of thriller series that, have evolutions of characters. Normally the detectives change or, other things change. Yeah. And so this has been an interesting journey for Gus. But I kind of want to dig into your book that's coming out.
Please stop.
No, because I had the amazing opportunity to read it early and I loved it. So without any spoilers, can you kind of give us a plot overview of this book?
Yes. So I wanted to write that book easily for a decade or two.
Wow.
Right. So I came into writing late, obviously, but my wife and I, when we had a third child, went away for a long weekend, bucket list. What do we each want to do? Become an author. And then, that was years ago, right? The kids are up and out of the house. But right at that moment, I started thinking about what are the cool storylines or like not trope, but like, what are the interesting stories? Like you'd go on and read some weird story about a cave in like Norway. That could be a setting for, those types of things. And I have a list. I have a list of like 8 or 10 topics.
Oh, okay.
This was top of the list forever. I didn't write it first, but then as soon as I get the 3-book deal, I'm like, I got to do it, right? I really got to do it. And so the short of it is it's basically what I wanted to do was see how somebody that adhered to the Old Testament that was written, centuries ago, right? In a world constructed of a different paradigm, how somebody would view those ideals and, passages in today's society. Square peg, round hole. Right. But if somebody truly, truly stuck to it, then mayhem ensues. And so that's what we want to do. And then for location, it was, could you really do that in like Midtown? Probably not. Right. Could you do it in Chicago? Right. It really needs to be sort of a remote kind of closed off setting. And that's where it got situated in Maine.
Yeah, this one, the setting was phenomenal just because it, like from the get-go, I was like, this is creepy. Like, I don't want to live here. I don't want to be here. Like, this is the type of town you like go into and you're like, we need to leave. And so, but I loved the research that I felt went into it, specifically when you bring in the religious expert to kind of explain so much information. How much research actually for you goes into kind of creating these cases, and where do you usually begin? Because it's so believable, at least in my mind, when I've been reading these books.
Yeah. So a great question. So that has, I never thought it would be, right? Like a fragile male ego, that's become a source of pride.
Gotcha.
I never knew what other authors did. I mean, I've heard a quote somewhere, I forget who said it, like, it is fiction, right? Like you can make up anything you want to make up.
Right.
So in the first book, I had lots of time, right? There was probably like 19,000 drafts of that book. I just research, and I'm not a mad researcher by nature, but I just research. In that book, it was the toxin used,
Yes.
That type of stuff, right? But I really get into it, and I really wanted to be accurate. Like I don't need it to be like, certified, but I really wanted it to be true to what's there. Like all the musician stuff is true, right? I get that from my son. Sam, you walk into a green room, what do you see and smell? Like I want it to be authentic, right?
Right.
And so for this one, this one was sort of a tall order. I know or knew zero about religion. Right. Born and raised, and I would, first communion. And that was my parents were like, okay, like you're off, right? You're done. So I'm not church going and not religious. I appreciate that and respect others that have that view and that ordeal, but that's not me. Right. So I literally started researching what's the difference between Christianity and Catholicism. I started at that level.
Okay.
And just went on, and I built sort of a family tree of religions that adhered to it, right? So to answer your question, a ton of research went into that to make that accurate. Yeah.
I can tell just because it felt like I am a practicing Catholic, and I was like, wow, like
That's awesome.
This is stuff that like I can understand and kind of know. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but even what happens with the church leader in his past, it made sense that like certain things could happen and kind of, proceed how it did. And I appreciate, I was like, he must have really went down a rabbit hole here because it just was so believable, which added to the enjoyment of it for me as a reader. Like I was like, I don't mind unhinged, outlandish stuff, but some of it, when you're talking about specifically religion, like I feel like it does have to be grounded in some sort of believable foundation if it's an existing thing, right? So, that was so great. I appreciated that as a reader, but have you ever kind of discovered something in your research that just changed the direction of your plot or your story?
I can't think of anything offhand. I'll give you a couple examples, if you don't mind, of how I found sort of a hard right turn during my writing. It's not so much a plot, I suppose. Maybe it is. We'll see. First, to come back, Father Benedict is modeled loosely, but modeled after a real person. I'll hit you off on who that is. I don't want to divulge, but yeah, there's somebody there that I based that background on. So a lot of that history actually happened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. So Karma was written first as kind of a thriller-ish type thing. I think in there, a lot of the toxin, when I really wanted to write about the toxin, the deep dive in that research shaped that story a lot.
Gotcha.
Right. So I won't spoil it for anybody. Wings of Madness, this is a spoiler alert for Wings of Madness.
Spoiler alert. We'll just put that there.
Block your ears. I was on a page out of call it 90,000 words. I was at probably 45 or 50,000 words on that when I had to figure out how the women were being taken out of the clubs. Had no idea.
When I was reading that book, I was like, where is this going to go? Because I am trying to figure it out and I cannot like physically figure it out. It was genius. It was good.
Yeah. So I had to go back and redo a lot of stuff to have that element to it. And then in this book here, I'll say probably not. This book sort of wrote itself. So there weren't a whole lot of hard right or left turns in this. I usually take about a month or so at the front end and do all the character backstories and the setting and the time of year and then, that sort of stuff, right? Before I kind of launch into it. And I am definitely a planner. I have like a hardcore outline.
Okay.
And so this, I found once I got that first like 70 or 80 pages of like things, the solid foundation, it was such a joy to write. It really wrote itself. It got to the point where my son, Sam, the musician, reads all, he's my alpha reader. He reads everything and he read it and he's a hard critic. Oh. And he was like, I got nothing. You crushed it. I gave it to my editor of the publisher and she came back and the only edit they had in the book, the only one edit, which was like huge, was the characters in here say yeah a lot. And people outside of New England are going to be reading this book. You might want to dial that back a little bit, right? That was it. Yeah, this sailed through editing and copy editing. Yeah, it was great.
That must be such an amazing feeling, though, as a writer to like get to that point at your third book where it's like you feel confident about this book and everyone else is loving it. What great feedback. It
was great, especially after Wings. There's a saying, apparently I've learned, there's a saying in the industry that, the second book, she's a bitch. And that was really true here. Like I said, I wrote Karma, and that went through some editing, nothing
Right.
big in Karma, moderate amount. And then I wrote a second book, and my editor outside of the publisher thought my second book was really good. Like, your writing's really come a long way. So I'm like, well, I got this, right? So I sat down to write Wings, and that was like 3 hardcore rounds of edits. I mean, hardcore, that was, at a certain point, I'm like, this has to stop, right? So at the end, I wrote it, I'm like, just take it. Like, take it. I didn't know if that was a good book. And honestly, I'm just done, right? It ended up, it's gotten, I think, the best reviews so far. It's gotten great reviews, so.
I loved it. So I'm sorry you had to go through all that, but the product was phenomenal. So I enjoyed it.
Oh, they're just happens, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes it's hard, and it's right. Like, I've talked to a lot of other authors, and second books, they're hard. Like, whether it be a second book in a standalone or like a second book in a series, it's just a hard. Every author I think that I've talked to has said that. So you are not alone.
Company too. I love hearing that. Right? Like,
yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, you're not alone. But the villains, specifically in this book, are memorable because they're not just evil. Like, they have very understandable sometimes motivations. When you build like an antagonist, what makes someone like compelling to write? How are you crafting your villains?
It's funny. So in the first book, I wanted to be very much somebody that sort of got caught up in their own like emotions, like very emotional. Right. And so that, like, if you take somebody like, you or I today, like what we have views or perspectives on or emotions or we feel passionately about, and you sort of stretch and strain that. That's what I went for in Karma. And you've read it, so you know, like, it's like just that. And especially that there's a breaking point in there, if you recall.
Yes.
And after that breaking point, there's no going back. That's just the way we go. Right. And then in Wings, it really was that Wings is a story, and it says this on the jacket. I mean, it really is a story about somebody that's slipping into psychosis. And so you follow them down that rabbit hole. And that's what I wanted to play on. I wanted it to be like, to a certain point, even for the reader, like, is this really happening? Or is this in the head? Or, is it a whisper? Is he hearing? Is it like, I wanted that. I really tried that, right? So the villain there was in their own mind, a good person, but not, right? Mm-hmm. And then in Before the Devil Knows, that really was, call it what it is. That was somebody that took religion to the nth degree. Yeah. And they felt completely justified.
Yeah.
In everything they did and everything they viewed. And they weren't wrong. They had to teach everybody else they were wrong, right?
Right. Right. And that's what, when I like promote your series and I tell people to read it, I'm like, it has a villain POV that you like really start to understand. It's not just like the big bad, like Wizard of Oz behind the screen that you're kind of hearing about from Gus and Vanessa. Like, you legitimately get to go in their head, and it's so well done and creepy that it just hooks me. Like, I'm like, I want to know more about the bad guy. Like,
that's so awesome to hear.
Yeah. We kind of talked about like Gus' evolution over the past 3 books. So I do want to talk about that because it's just been fun seeing him evolve as a reader. How do you know, without giving away anything, do you know ultimately where you want his journey to end, as far as like when you zoom out and think about the series, hopefully as a whole, hopefully we get more books with him, but like, do you know where you want him to kind of end up?
You must be prescient, right? I've been thinking a lot about that. So newsflash, in a couple months ago, when Before the Devil was going through its kind of last copy editing stuff, the publisher called and asked if I thought I had more Gus in me. And at first I said, not sure. Let me think about it. Maybe one, whatever. And then back to Sam, right? I have 3 children. I love them equally, but Sam's a creepy one, right? He got some of the ideas. Sam read it, and after he read Before the Devil Knows, he's like, awesome. Like, it was great, but I'm just sort of surprised you're still doing it kind of book to book. And he came up with an idea. Now you read it. Mm-hmm. He came up with that idea. So I pulled it back from the publisher, rewrote a couple of the chapters, rewrote the epilogue to have that in there. And so short of it is I signed another 3-book deal for Gus. So there'll be 6 Gus books. So actually right before I got on here, I just hit page 200 out of about 300 on Gus 4. So it's coming together. It's coming together. And I'm right about that point where, I'll come back to your question in a sec, but I'm right about that point, like right around 200 pages. it sounds weird. It sounds like bougie or artsy or whatever. And I'm not that way, but it really happens where the story just kind of shows itself. And I'm a planner. Like I outline this stuff out. I outline a frack out of this. And right now it's just kind of like, that's where it's going. That is what's going to happen. And I usually know the ending. I usually have, like with each of the other books, I had the ending in my head. Before the Devil Knows changed, like I just said, but I had like before I even put pen to paper, I had the ending. Long way of saying, so now I've been thinking a lot lately about where Gus as a character will go, and Vanessa. Right? I mean, Vanessa, I'll take credit for that. I thought of Vanessa, right? She's modeled after a couple people that I know. And I love that character. She's one of my favorite characters. I love her as a character. So I'm wondering where the two of them will go. I'm hoping at some point, I'm sort of starting to toy with the idea that maybe there's a spin-off series with Vanessa taking the lead. Right? I'd love that. I'd love basically a kick-ass woman that just like rocks it and solves crimes in a weird way, right? In a different way, right? So for Gus, I don't know. It's tough because the evolution of Gus to date, I didn't touch this earlier, but he was almost innocent in the first book.
Yes.
Right? He's more musician than FBI agent. In the second book, he got that dose of reality of kind of, the hardness of it all. In the third book, I think in the third book, he gets more grizzled. He's like, listen, we just got to cut through this shit. We got to get this shit done. And he passes up on music stuff to get it done. Right? So you can see that shift in him. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. He's got 3 more books at least, right? I don't know if he hangs up his cleats at the end. Okay. I don't know if like this. I mean, as you can tell by now, I like dramatic endings. So it's gonna be something dramatic. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. We'll see. I'm gonna see right along with you. I'm gonna see where he goes.
I love that like Gus is kind of making his own way. Go along. Yeah. You kind of answered this, but I just want to ask, just in case it's not who I think it is, but is there any secondary character that wasn't really supposed to play a large role and now is playing a large role? I think you touched on Vanessa, but I think she's always been like Gus's foil. Is there any other character that you maybe were like, oh, I didn't really expect to like continue them throughout the book, and yet you did?
So actually several. So with Karma, that story, morphed in over time, but that story always had Mel as a protagonist. Gus was somebody that came in, toyed around, but went away. Right? Oh. When I couldn't write that book, I flipped it and said, well, Gus has got to be there full time. And that's how I made Mel a little bit of an outsider of that group.
Right.
Right. She wasn't all in. Right.
Right.
So then when you go forward from there, I didn't know if Mel would go forward. Like, and so she's in there somewhere. Right. Mm-hmm. I think the characters that are playing more of a role as we go forward are his boss, Jeff Cottagio. He was a throwaway character. He was basically Gus wasn't in charge of everything, right? He's become more prominent. He becomes even more prominent.
Okay.
And then TJ, Thomas Jefferson, TJ, the other agent, right? He and Tony Blackford, they stick around. They're constants. Never thought that would be the case. I thought they were like one-hit wonders and gone. So I think that group over time is going to sort of do this through the books, right? Become more prominent when needed, right?
Gotcha. That makes total sense. And I know we've talked like a lot about the finished product, but as a reader, I'm like always fascinated by what happens behind the scenes with authors. Your books are so well paced and the twist always feels surprising and like timed perfectly. So how do you know when you have found the balance between like character moments and nonstop action when you're pacing the novel?
So great questions, Britt. I'll try to keep it short. When I started, my first several books were like The Rookie Mistake. All plot, no character.
Okay.
Everyone makes it apparently. I did too. I just dread to think what I put my early editors through, right? Just garbage, right? And so for me, it's been a real struggle. I love plots. I love twists and turns and red herrings, and I love all that stuff. It's been a real struggle for me to write characters. That's one area that I was really, really poor at. And I think I've gotten better. Still, you can always improve, right? But that's something. So to hear you say they're good characters, that's like music to my ears, because that's been hard for me.
Good.
So when I think about the plots and twists, that's always the easy stuff. So what I typically do is I'll hammer it out. By the way, Vanessa has a slang and a language that is clearly not me, right? Like, I have kids in their 30s and 20s. I listen. I
Gotcha.
write notes. I keep things. My daughter come up and she'll say something like, yeah, Dad, no cap. I got to write that one down.
You're like, Vanessa has to say that.
Totally, right? So I have a long list, like pages long of lists of things she should say, right? I look into urban dictionary. Like I do all that stuff because it's just not me. That's the stuff, right? So when I do all that stuff, at the end of the book, I basically write a first draft as best I can, but it's largely blocking and tackling stuff. Okay. Mystery, clue to clue. Like I said, an outline. The outline for Devil, the outline itself was over 60 pages long. 60.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if I could show it to you, it's all color-coded, right? So
you're speaking to my heart, though, for color coding. Oh, my God.
The crime scenes are red, the red herring's green. Like, so if I fan through, if I'm looking for something, I'm looking green. I'm plucking that stuff out. And at the end of every chapter in the outline, I have a to-do list, which carries forward. So when I go back through all the to-dos, check. So when I go through an editing, I make sure that stuff happens and it carries through. So then what I do is, I love different points of views. I have a point of view of the bad guy or woman, right? Point of view of like the clues of whatever different characters. So I'll grab those and I'll read just the point of views of the killer chapters, 2, 19, 33, whatever. And these usually like, 10 or so. I'll read just those so that the character arc works well. So the clues are as a slow boil, but not too slow. And then I'll kind of piece it all together in like a puzzle. And then I read it cover to cover. And if I'm a reader and if I'm not bored, in the muddle, as Dan Brown says, the middle, in the muddle, if I'm not bored and I think it's going fast, then I think it's ready for someone else's eyes.
Gotcha. So, you've tackled so many of my questions because I was going to ask about how you plant clues and stuff. And your outline, you need to frame those because that is probably amazing. What a cool memento though to have after you publish a book is to kind of go through and see all that. Totally. That's so fun. I do want to kind of look at what's next because as a reader, I'm always like, I finish a book and I'm like, need the next one. And I know as an author, it's like hard because you're like, that takes time, Brittany. We have to actually write it. So like when the next Gus Wheeler book, we ended on a serious cliffhanger in this one, like you said, like we really did. Is that going to be the focus of your next book, or are we kind of going in a different direction? What do you?
No, that's the focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So book 4 picks up. It's got a working title. I don't want to divulge it.
No.
I called the title. I want to come back to titling in a minute. There's like a whole process for that. So it picks up essentially a few days after Before the Devil Knows. Picks right up.
Okay. So that kind of answers that question. I do have a question from a fan that submitted, my follower. Do you have any plans for audiobooks for this?
They're already in the works.
Oh,
so
good.
I wish I had my calendar in front of me. Don't quote me on this. You can go on Amazon. The audiobook for Karma comes out, I believe, September 22nd.
So this year. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. And the audiobook for Wings comes out like a month later, October sometime.
Is it the same narrator? Do you know?
Yes, I got to pick the narrator, which was awesome. They gave me a lot of choices. And then I picked someone who I just think nails it in terms of tone and, just the narration's great, right?
Oh, I can't wait to go back then and listen to the audiobook and kind of see Gus come to life because his voice is in my head, but I want to hear his voice out in the world. Okay. I know you wanted to mention titling. I'd love to know, how do you come up with the titles? Do you go through a few different titles? What does that process look like?
So never knew this before. And I'm sure most publishers do it now, but my publisher, Karma Never Sleeps, was like an 11th hour ad. So for a decade, easily, that book was called What Came Around.
Oh, okay.
Right? There's a play on the idiom. And then when I got the first, contract, the free book deal, I started playing through, different plays on different idioms, thinking almost like James Patterson had, right? The nursery rhymes, right? That type of, and whoever. But then they're like, doesn't play well. Our research shows it suggests I think it was like a hardcore romance or something. It didn't suggest a thriller. So is they push it through AI and get AI's take on is a psychological thriller. How would this title work? Right. So that was a very emotional point for me because really is your baby. You're living with this for so long and there's a lot of emotion. Right. And so that's 2 weeks of kind of hell. When they're like, no, we're not going to go with that title. And I was really pushing for listen, this is what I have in mind. I had a call. I'm just I'm all over it. In hindsight, I'm like, whatever. It's just, like, but at the time, right, it means the
Right.
right? And so when they came up with Karma Never Sleeps, I showed my wife, who's a genius. She's just like, they nailed it. Go with it. Not a word. They crushed it. That's an awesome title that is going to play well. I'm like, hun, I defer, right? Sure enough, everybody says a great title.
It is. I mean, it really is a great title. I've loved all your titles. Like this title, when it finally clicked in the narrative, I'm like,
right,
there's the title. Look, I'm like,
yeah.
It makes sense.
Yep.
So no, they're always fun. So that's interesting that it's hard to let go, especially if you've been calling your book something for so long.
Exactly. The second book, Wings, there's a quote in the beginning. I just want to grab it real quick.
Yes.
And I love, one of my favorite writers, if not my favorite, is John Connolly. Plug for John Connolly, Charlie Parker series, phenomenal series, absolutely phenomenal. He puts a quote at the beginning of his books. And I just love it. He's so cool. Yeah. And they're usually some old like Roman quote or a biblical quote or something. I'm like, he's so brilliant to find these quotes. Well, I think he's brilliant, but it's not as hard as I once thought. So the quote in Wings is, "Today I felt pass over me a breath of wind from the wings of madness." It's from Charles Baudelaire. He's a French philosopher. So Wings didn't have a title forever. Okay. And the night, my books are due the last day of January, the draft to the publisher. And that night before, and I always hold it to the last minute. I like to let things marinate. I read it through cover to cover. I kind of tweak and I play with it. The night before, I'm like, what's the title? And I read the quote. I'm like, Wings of Madness. Slapped it on the cover, pushed it in. I had my friend push it through AI and they're like, crushes it. Awesome title. Thule was like, done. So then Before the Devil Knows, I wrote the book, grabbed the title. That'd be a great title, right? Grab the quote, right? So
I loved it. No, I appreciate that. So I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. So before things wrap up, it's one of my favorite parts of the interview. It's a lightning round. So just don't overthink it. Go with your first instinct. But I'd love to know what you're currently reading.
I just finished It's Not Her by Mary Kubica.
Yes.
Really good book. I read Local Women Missing and liked that a lot. I've met Mary a number of times. Oh, sweet as she is just such a good human, right? I love that. I just finished before that Darby Kane. She has the quote on Before the Darby Kane's book. That was a fantastic book. I love Darby Kane's writing style, so I hard for Darby Kane. And now I just picked up my first ever, embarrassed to say, Karen Slaughter book, Pretty Girls.
Oh, okay.
My books have been likened to Karen Slaughter's in a number of reviews. I'm like, I got to read her stuff. And I just started literally this morning. I'm like, woof. If someone thinks I write like this, that's a compliment because she's
like, no, it's a good comparison. You're probably like, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Exactly.
It's a good thing. That's a great comparison. Okay. Writing drink of choice. What are you usually drinking while you're writing or drafting?
I love iced coffee, nitros.
I do too. Iced coffee is like my thing. Okay. Are you a morning writer or a night owl?
I'm definitely a morning person. So that comes with maturity and age. I was definitely a night person in younger days, but I'm up crack of dawn. And I have a real job, right? I still have a real job. So I'm up crack of dawn. And I probably write about half my time during the day, but I find I get most of the stuff done early morning. And then I'll come back to it in the afternoon. Like I like to write something, again, let it marinate, come back to it, tweak it, sleep on it. I have that process. So I come back to it in the afternoon, but nitro coffee.
Gotcha. Okay. Besides Gus, who is your favorite fictional detective?
Charlie Parker. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Charlie Parker, hands down. If anybody hasn't read those books, there's a sprinkle of supernatural in there. The writing is beyond. It's amazing, atmospheric, all those adjectives you want to use. And Charlie Parker is a phenom lead character.
No, I totally agree. I've read them. I totally agree with you. Okay. I do want to save some time. We have a few questions that got submitted from my followers. So the first one is it's a fun one, is if Gus Wheeler could solve one famous, like real life mystery, what would you want him to solve?
Whoa, that's a good one. Oh man. It's funny. So I love weird things, like for lack of better, the occult thing. So I would go to the JFK conspiracy or Roswell.
Oh, no. Yes to both of those. That would be amazing. Okay. Have you ever had to remove like a twist or like an ending because it just was too unbelievable?
No, not that I can think of. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Because like when they submitted, I was like, I want to know the answer because all three of your books are pretty believable. Like I've never like finished a book from you and been like, well, that can't happen. Like,
Yeah.
that's never
Yeah.
been something. So, okay, great. And I know you set all of your books normally in New England kind of settings. Is there like a location that you want to set a future book? Are you still going to focus on New England, or is there ever a place you kind of want to venture to?
Yeah, interesting. So yes, hadn't thought of it until just now. So I'll give you a plug if it ever happens. I am absolutely fascinated with like New Orleans and Louisiana Bayou.
I'm from there. So
I really?
yeah.
Yeah. And so my son Sam went to Loyola for jazz.
Okay.
And so and I had been to New Orleans for work a few times, but not a lot. And then we got to learn and see more about the city. He married a Metairie girl. So now since he's moved to Nashville, I don't go to New Orleans as like I used to, but there's something about that. I'm back to the occult. I'm back to John Carpenter's Serpent and Rainbow.
Yes.
Right. I'm back to those types of stories that have that voodoo-esque element to it. Right. I would love to write the book. Now see, I've just like pulled the secret out of me.
I know.
One of the other stories on my list that's gone on forever, in addition to like Old Testament stuff, is something about that sort of, voodoo-esque element in New Orleans. And it doesn't have to be real, but it does have to be, there are a lot of medicinal things that come from nature. And that was based on that powder and that thing. So I would love to write something that plays on that and has sort of that, maybe it's the underbelly of the quarter, but there's something, similar to maybe Wings, where is it real? Is it not real? But there's something, there's a new friend of mine, author Jen Moorhead, who writes Louisiana-based thrillers. So if anybody that likes that setting, Jen, plug for Jen's book. They're amazing.
Cool.
She's a phenom writer, absolute phenom writer.
I'll have to check her out because I grew like 18 years. I grew up in a very small Cajun town, right on the Gulf, and it's my favorite setting to read just because I lived there and I've like gone through all the voodoo culture and like everything. It's so much fun. So I'm going to push that. Please write that. Please write that.
And so Gus went to Loyola, so he could be pulled back there for a case, right?
That would be fun.
Oh, damn. That's a good one, Britt. I've already got the synopsis for the next 3 books, the one I'm working on now. I could slide one into New Orleans. All right. I could give you huge credit if that happens.
Okay, well, I'm not going to hold you to it, but I will be on the lookout if that does happen. But that's all my questions. So, John, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, and congratulations on Before the Devil Knows. For everyone watching, this book comes out July 29th. So if you enjoy fast-paced FBI procedurals, twisty thrillers, and just crime thrillers with characters you're going to love, definitely check it out. Follow John, follow me, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.